Hi, my name is Erica Manuel, and I will be presenting on my project, which is titled Understanding Terrestrial Mammal Abundance in Monteverde, Costa Rica, Camera Trap Findings in Seasonal and Historical Contexts. So this is my project, and it's on behalf of my selection for the Jennings Brave Companions Award. This past summer, I went to Monteverde, Costa Rica, and decided to return again in the spring for my follow-on project. I wanted to do something that helped inform the local community here while still having a research aspect. And so I decided to do this research again in Monteverde, which is a part of the highlands of Costa Rica. It's known for the cloud forest and all the different inhabitants and biodiversity here and just all the various wildlife around the area. Okay, so the purpose of this project was to explore how Costa Rica's natural history of reforestation has impacted wildlife in the Monteverde community. So to start, Costa Rica has made a lot of efforts in reforestation after they had very heavy periods of deforestation, which had driven a lot of the animal species out of their natural habitats. And some of these species were displaced because they depended on these mature, pristine forests that were undisturbed to survive. And when these forests were cleared, they had nowhere else to go. And so in 1950s, this deforestation began, and originally the forests covered 85% of the country, as shown on this map to the right. But after the 1970s, there were only 35% of forest cover. And as of 2017, they've gotten back to 52% forest cover. But still, these changes in conditions have had unpredictable consequences for the animals living in the area. So I wanted to do a study here again to see about how great Monteverde has been with large-scale reforestation, how that can be used in other conservation models. And the places that we set our camera traps actually used to be pastured lands that were heavily fragmented, but are now reforested. So a lot of our purpose came from just this understanding that there are environmental consequences for human actions, and how is that affecting the community's species richness and abundance in the area, and how will that change as we artificially replant these plants and trees and try to make the area reforested again. So Monteverde has the Bellbird Biological Corridor, which are these connected stretches of forests so that animals can roam freely through. And so we were going to look at how the creation of biological corridors allowed certain species to return and even become more abundant. There's not a lot of research done about the abundance of species before this deforestation. So we're trying to look at whether these animals have been able to move back and live in these newly reforested areas and are treating these mature forests the same as they used to previously, even though they are reforested and sometimes not even with native species. We're also trying to look at the seasonality changes, how animal activity has shifted between the rainy and dry seasons here to help better understand when and how these species are, using the reforested land and whether that changes based on the seasons. It's important to also compare what we're seeing now to what was recorded in the past, even though there is very little besides local knowledge, because these ecosystems are constantly changing. There's a lot of different human pressures like development and habitat loss and climate change that also affect these communities. And by looking at these patterns of animal abundance and activity, we can start to understand how these species are responding to these changes, whether they're adapting, even disappearing. Some definitely are, some are moving in, and this type of comparison help us know what's being lost, what's being recovered, and where we can put conservation efforts that might need more focus moving forward. So for our methods, we use camera traps, which is just one way of non-invasively looking at animal activity, but this allows for continuous around-the-clock monitoring without disturbing the animals in any way. And so we place these cameras in the high elevation cloud forest in Monteverde, in the Curicancha Reserve, and the Crandall Reserve, and we had settings on them that were triggered by motion, and they recorded date, time, and after they were triggered by motion, they recorded for 10 seconds. And deployed for 8 weeks during the rainy season, which was from October to November, and 8 weeks during the dry season from around the end of February to early April. And to know we were not able to identify every species down to like a very species level. It was very difficult to identify certain animals down to that level, like possums when you only saw a tail, but some animals were easier to identify, so we ended up grouping a few of them together for the data, which you'll see soon. So for our data, we started out with 1,436 overall observations that we caught between the two seasons. And once we took humans away from the camera trap videos, because these were also placed on places that had trails, we ended up having 417 observations from the rainy season and 256 observations from the dry season. So it was around, 100, a little more less observations seen in the dry season than the rainy season. So there might be overall higher animal activity or more detections during the rainy season because of resources like food and water and cover more available. And even though species richness, which is the number of different species, ended up staying the same basically between the two seasons, the abundance dropped for most species during the dry season, with one big exception, which was the agouti species, which remained the same. But when we looked at species distribution, agoutis dominated in both seasons. They were by far the most frequently observed. Coatis and opossums also were seen in relatively higher numbers, and they were both seen more commonly in the rainy season than in the dry season. But other species that we saw, like pumas, rabbits, and hyras, are present in both seasons, but they showed up in fairly low numbers. One of the most exciting results here was to capture the margay, which is a rare and surprising species. They're considered near threatened worldwide and particularly threatened in Costa Rica. We detected margays, which are typically found only in these pristine, undisturbed forests, so it was really great for the community to see that we had some margay detections in this reforested area, especially when a lot of our cameras were placed close to human disturbed trails that were similarly close to more urbanized areas that we could get into in the forest. But this is also notable because a similar study was done in 2022 over 305 nights, and only 2 margays were detected. So this could be really a promising sign of forest recovery for the local community, which I'm very happy that we found this out. We found the same amount of margays across the rainy and dry season. We found 5 margays in both seasons. But locals also noted that margays haven't been spotted in the area in many years, so this new introduction of these predators is a really exciting development for the community. So overall, our results highlighted the potential success of these reforestation efforts and how the biological corridors may be helping to restore these animal populations in these previously fragmented landscapes. But they also show that some species are still rare or difficult to detect, which of course helps remind us that full ecosystem recovery takes time and continued effort. For future research and directions, I think it would be really valuable to not only extend the camera trapping across multiple years to see longer trends, but also place these in reforested areas and mature forests to help compare habitat use, especially in highlands and lowlands. And then lastly, I think that we should combine the camera trap data possibly with vegetation survey and see how different plants could affect the presence of animals in the area, and the forest structure could influence like different species. So this is a 2-minute presentation that I put together of some of the highlights that I found on these camera trap videos. All right, and lastly, I want to thank Larry Jennings and Catherine Jennings for sponsoring my time abroad with the Jennings Brave Companions Fellowship and the Monteverde Institute for supplying me with the camera traps and helping me with this study, and to Peter Freeman for advising me on this project. I could not have done it without all the help that I've gotten, and I'm very thankful for this, and I'm sure the Monteverde community is very thankful for this project as well.